Good morning. My name is Ruby Annan, and today I'll be presenting my research project on altered music tastes in former high school musicians. The purpose of my study is to examine the extent to which playing an instrument in high school for 3 or more consecutive years affects adult music taste. So why does my study matter? As you are probably well aware, playing an instrument is a common experience among high schoolers, with one 2019 study finding that around 11% of high school students participate in band. However, playing in a band is not the only way high schoolers play music. Students often play music by themselves, with a group of friends, take music lessons from a private instructor, and more, meaning that even more than the 11% of high school students are involved in some form of music training. Finally, almost everyone listens to music, so this study can help you understand what impacts your music taste, even if you weren't a high school musician. When we learn and practice playing musical instruments, we are often exposed to new genres of music. In this study, we will explore how playing music affects our exposure to and therefore listening habits for certain genres. So how did I come to this topic? My own experience as a high school musician has helped me develop certain preferences and appreciation for some genres, especially jazz. I began to wonder, how often do others experience this? And also, will I always appreciate and listen to jazz, or are my preferences and appreciation for it more temporary? But before we dive deeper, let's define a few key terms that are important to understanding my research. The first is music taste. Music taste is our personal preferences, appreciation for, and listening choices for certain genres or styles of music. Music tastes of individuals can be influenced by many factors, including peer preferences, parent preferences, socioeconomic backgrounds, the study of music, and more. The next key term is music genre. Music genres are certain categories or styles of music that have similar characteristics, such as rhythms, melodies, and types of instruments used. In this study, I examined preferences for 12 music genres. We should also define the term musician. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a musician is a person who plays, conducts, or performs music. However, for the purposes of this study, a musician refers to a person who played an instrument in high school for 3 or more consecutive years. The final term is the reminiscence bump. According to Kelly Jakubowski, professor of music psychology at Durham University, the reminiscence bump is a disproportionate recall of autobiographical memories from adolescence and early adulthood, which makes adults remember memories from the ages of 10 to 30 more vividly, more often, and with more favor than for memories from outside this time period of their lives. I found 3 key studies that guided me in my research. The first study, conducted by Paul Elvers et al., examined music preferences of musicology students in university compared to the music preferences of their non-musicology peers. The researchers observed that the musicology students had altered music tastes and exhibited greater preferences towards less popular genres of music. This provides evidence relevant to my study that musical experience could potentially alter music tastes of high school musicians as well. The second foundational study was conducted by John Ginocchio, a researcher from Southwest Minnesota State University. He examined the effects of 5 or more years of music training on non-music majors' preferences for non-popular styles of music, with participation in band having the most significant impact on altering music preferences. This research shows that several years playing musical instruments impacts musicians' preferences, which is useful for my study that examines the effects of 3 or more years of instrument training. Finally, the last study, conducted by Kelly Jakubowski, analyzes the relationship between adults' autobiographical music-related memories and certain popular songs from the reminiscence bumps of participants. Jakubowski determined that the reminiscence bump effect extends to music-related memories as well, which, for example, means that an 80s teen who has good memories associated with 80s music is more likely to listen to and appreciate 80s music. This study provides evidence that playing an instrument during high school, an experience that occurs during the reminiscence bump, could potentially increase individuals' favor for and therefore listening preferences towards the styles they played. While previous literature helped me gain a better understanding of what influences our music taste, I still did not find all the answers I was looking for in current academic research. This brought me to a gap in the academic conversation. I found that no previous literature had investigated whether or not altering music tastes of high school musicians persist into adulthood. And this leads to the question, to what extent does playing an instrument for 3 or more consecutive years during high school affect the music preferences of adults aged 21 years and older? And I hypothesized that playing an instrument in high school for 3 or more consecutive years affects adult music taste. I decided to do a mixed method approach for my study. To effectively gather data to answer my research question, I chose to distribute a Google Forms survey to all study participants in which anybody could answer, regardless of musical experience. I also decided to conduct interviews via phone call with volunteers who took the survey and were high school musicians. I chose to conduct a survey because it allowed me to collect large numbers of responses simultaneously that could be quantified, categorized, compared, and organized into charts and tables. Having quantitative data allowed me to most easily determine if differences in responses were statistically significant. Short answer questions as part of the survey also helped me gather brief information about high school musicians' attitudes about how playing an instrument in high school did or did not affect their music tastes. I also chose to conduct interviews because they allow me to gain a deeper insight into the attitudes of study participants through direct interaction, where I could ask questions that needed more explanation and elaboration than could be reasonably provided on a short answer question on a survey. Those who participated in the study were faculty, staff, parents of current students, and alumni of a private Catholic high school in South Florida who were over the age of 21 and graduated high school. The experimental group consisted of former high school musicians, while the control group consisted of former high school non-musicians. Both the experimental group and the control group answered questions on the survey about what genres of music they listened to. However, members of the experimental group had additional questions on the survey regarding playing experience, exposure to new genres, as well as listening and appreciation for the genres they played. Only members of the experimental group were interviewed because I asked questions about how playing an instrument in high school impacted their music tastes. After contacting my school's administrators, I was able to ask for volunteers to participate in my study and distributed the survey link via email. In the email, members of the experimental group were also asked if they would be willing to participate in an interview. I observed 4 trends in my study. First, I compared the listening habits of former high school musicians with former high school non-musicians. Second, I observed musicians' exposure to new genres of music from playing an instrument during high school. Third, I looked at whether or not former high school musicians listened to the styles of music they played during high school. And finally, I examined how playing an instrument in high school affects appreciation for the genres former musicians played. As part of the survey, participants from both groups were asked to select up to 3 out of 12 music genres they most often listened to. Participants could also write in their own genres using an other option. Since there were so many music genres that respondents selected and wrote in themselves, I chose to only observe the top 6 listened to genres per group. Note that since participants had the option to select up to 3 answer choices, the percentages in the table do not add to 100%. Rather, the percentages show that a certain proportion of the test population indicated that that genre was among their top 3 in their listening preferences. The top 6 genres for the experimental group were rock, country, pop, classical, jazz, and hip hop and rap. The top 6 genres for the control group were pop, rock, country, hip hop and rap, classical, and R&B and soul. The results show that the experimental group exhibited significantly greater preferences for classical and jazz music compared to the control group, providing evidence that playing a musical instrument in high school likely contributed to these results, as the 2 genres were commonly played among participants. A large majority and statistically significant portion of former high school musicians indicated that playing music during high school exposed them to new genres of music, as shown by 73.7% selecting either strongly agree with the statement. Former musicians were also asked if they listened to the genres of music or genres or styles of music they played in high school. The responses to the question were mixed, and no answer was statistically significant. One explanation of this is that it could be due to the participants playing marching or sporting event music, which is not commonly listened to. In my survey, 21.1% of former musicians indicated that they played this genre, while 0% indicated that they listened to it. Also, it is important to note on a short answer question, former musicians indicated that the most impactful genres on their listening habits were, again, classical and jazz, which participants commonly played in high school. An overwhelming majority, 89.5% of participants either strongly agreed or agreed with the statement that playing music in high school made them appreciate the styles of music they played. Also, 94% of short answer responses indicated that playing an instrument in high school affected their appreciation and or music taste for the genres they played. Both of these percentages are statistically significant and show that appreciation for genres high school musicians played do persist into adulthood. Due to limited interest and time constraints, I was only able to conduct 2 interviews with former high school musicians. Those being interviewed reported that playing an instrument in high school significantly increased their appreciation for the music styles they played, as well as altered their music taste. Based on the data collected from the survey and interviews, I can conclude that my hypothesis was correct. Playing an instrument in high school for 3 or more consecutive years does impact adult music taste. I found that, in adults, being a high school musician increased exposure to, listening to, and appreciation for certain genres played. The genres of music that I found to be the most impactful on adult music taste and appreciation were classical and jazz music. My study corroborated Paul Elvers et al.'s findings that students playing and studying music exhibit altered music tastes compared to their non-musical peers. It also corroborates the findings of Ginocchio's study in that it shows that 3 or more years of music training impacts musicians' preferences for not as popular genres. Finally, my study corroborates Jakubowski's findings in that high school band, an experience that occurs during the reminiscence bump, has former musicians favor the styles of music they played in high school. My research filled a gap in the academic conversation in that it examined how playing an instrument in high school for 3 or more consecutive years impacts the music taste of adults, which had not previously been done. So what are the implications of my study? Since playing an instrument in high school influences music tastes of students way into adulthood, these findings could motivate schools to place greater emphasis on music education opportunities, as well as lead parents to encourage their children to learn how to play musical instruments. Furthermore, greater appreciation for certain styles of music elicited by playing instruments could inspire some high school musicians to seek careers in music, which could contribute to the development of a multitude of music-related industries. Additionally, even adults who gain a greater appreciation for music but do not work in music development could help support and patronize the musical and performing arts. I did encounter several delimitations with my study. Initially, I intended to conduct my research on participants associated with a public school, but after reaching out to 6 schools in my area, I did not hear back, meaning I had no choice but to conduct my research on participants associated with my own school. One delimitation that came with this was the school that was associated with my participants does not have very well-funded or organized music programs. Because of this, participants in my study who attended the school likely did not have as rich of a musical experience as if they were to attend a public school with better music education. Also, the conditions to be part of the experimental group were very specific, meaning that I was left with a smaller sample size for my experimental group. This makes my data less reliable than if I were to have a larger population size. Finally, since the vast majority of participants associated with the school are Catholic or belong to another Christian denomination, there were significantly high preferences towards Christian worship music, which very likely skewed my data. Some limitations with my study are confounding variables and my own lack of advanced statistical analysis skills. Confounding variables are outside variables that are not examined by the study but may have an effect on my results. For example, former musicians who played in both high school and college may have picked up an altered music taste from college, not high school. I could have limited the specifications of the experimental group to include those who exclusively played in high school, but I knew I'd not get enough responses that way. I also lacked advanced statistical analysis skills, which led me to relying on the internet and others to help me analyze my data, and this could have led to some inaccuracies in the results. If I could do this whole experiment over again, I would conduct it with participants associated with a public school with well-established music programs so that I get more responses, higher diversity, and less bias. Additionally, I would narrow the requirements of the experimental group to be former musicians who played no later than high school. Of course, given that I had the sample size large enough to do so. This way, I could isolate playing during high school so as to avoid confounding variables. For future researchers, I would also recommend conducting the study at one or even multiple large public schools to ensure large enough sample size and more diversity. I'd also suggest narrowing the definition of former musician. Other things that my future research could examine building off of my research is comparing the extent to which different types of musical experiences in high school, for example, marching band, orchestra, garage bands with friends, or just playing by oneself, influences the music tastes of adults. And here are my sources, and on to oral defense.
Thank you, Rudy. First question is, how did your initial exploration of scholarly conversation lead to your final research question project building?
So when I was first exploring this topic, I first examined what factors influence music takes in general, for example, peer preferences, parent preferences, or socioeconomic backgrounds. And then I looked into how playing during high school and college affects the music preferences of current musicians. But then I found that no previous study had examined if those alternate music tastes persist into adulthood.
Ruby, how do your findings provide directions for future research in the field?
So what my findings do that provide future direction for researchers is that they could build off of this study. I determined in my study that playing in high school does in fact impact music tastes of adults. But something that future researchers could examine is what different types of musical experiences, like I said, like marching band or orchestra, how those impact music tastes.
What was the most important research skill you developed as a result of this process, and how will you apply it to future endeavors?
I think the most important skill that I developed for this process was learning how to build a good and effective survey, learning how to design those questions, as also learning how to conduct interviews. I think that's very important for my future because in college I intend to do more research, and learning how to build these skills here will help me in college.